Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the first in our Women in Leadership Conversation series of 2024. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We are recording this session, so we'll send out a link to the recording in the next day or so if you would like to rewatch or send to your colleagues. And we have built in time to answer questions, so please, if you have any questions as we're going, drop them into the Q&A box. Without further ado, I will hand you over to our host for this afternoon, Margot Hoyt, to get us started.
Thanks so much, Kate, and welcome everybody. Really happy to have you with us today. We have people from across North America and beyond joining us, and really looking forward to the conversation with Sandra. This series is something that's really important to me as a woman and as a business leader. I believe in the importance of creating environments that support the advancement of talent. And we know that women have so much talent to offer organizations in roles at all levels. One way that we can help is to shine a spotlight and to contribute to the advancement of women by sharing success stories and insights from women who are seeing success and excelling in their careers. This conversation series is an opportunity to learn and explore more about what's been important to these women in their journeys. What external and internal forces have made a difference. We'll hear examples of organizational best practices for supporting women and creating environments where we can thrive. And I believe that everyone listening, me included, will take away some practical tips and inspiration that we can apply to our own careers. So let's make some introductions. My name is Margot Hoyt. I have the pleasure of being a leader of a dynamic team of North American leadership development professionals at LHH. We partner with organizations to assess and intentionally develop culture. We assess leadership capabilities for succession, for selection, for development. And of course, we tailor and develop leadership development programs for a variety of leadership communities at all levels, including women in leadership. And some of my favorite work has been working with women who are working on advancing their own careers, thinking about the skills, capabilities, career strategies that they need to put into place. And it's a big reason for the development of this conversation series. Today, we're very pleased to be talking with Sandra Quince. And let me give you a brief overview of her career to date. There's so much more to come, I'm sure. Sandra currently works with the Bank of America, and she's the Business Enablement and Leader on Loan Program Executive. She leads business operations across workforce development, as well as arts and heritage. And she's also the Leader on Loan Executive. Recently, and just prior to these roles, Sandra was the CEO for Paradigm for Parity. Many of you will know that organization, and we'll learn a bit more about it today. And that's through the Bank of America's Leader on Loan program. She worked with the coalition co-chairs and the board of directors to oversee the strategic vision and the growth plan. And she remains involved with that organization as a co-chair and board member. Sandra's had other positions in her career. One is the diversity and inclusion executive supporting the CEO and chief diversity officer at the Bank of America. She was also the head of D&I for the bank's Global Human Resources, an organization of over 2,500 employees. She's had over 15 years in HR across D&I, talent management, and development and learning in multiple organizations and industries. She's got a lot of experience to share with us. Her achievements and contributions are notable. She was selected as one of 50 Black women for the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women Impact Grant. She was named as 2022 D&I Leaders as one of the year's most inspiring diversity and inclusion leaders. And in 2021, she earned Oklahoma's The Journal Record's 50 Making a Difference list of honorees. And she's no stranger to a stage or a microphone. She's been featured and interviewed in various media as well. And finally, as part of this introduction, she also serves on a number of important and impactful community organizations in the Tulsa area, including Family and Children's Services, Greenwood Rising, the National Council of Nonprofits, ACE UP, the African American Leadership Academy, and Live Girl. I am honored, Sandra Quince, that you've joined us today, and we so look forward to learning more about you.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here. I thank you, Margot, for the invitation. I thank LHH and certainly Paradigm for Parity, and your partnership has been so critical to the success of our organization through your foundation. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, it's terrific, Sandra. And I'm just going to repeat some of what Kate said. You and I are going to have a conversation for a little while, but we're definitely going to open it up because I know there's going to be so many questions that come in, questions that people have brought into the conversation and questions that are going to come up as they hear about your insights and experience. So I'll try to remember everyone to give you a heads up when we're getting close to the end of our conversation and get those questions in, but start putting them in right away. All right, Sandra, I'm just going to start the conversation off with a really broad and kind of wide conversation. You've already achieved so much in your career. What do you attribute as some of the sort of key factors or influences in your success so far?
Yeah, so thank you. First of all, when you say that and when you read the bio, it does help me to sort of think about sort of my career trajectory. And especially as women, we tend to not pat ourselves on the back or celebrate our accomplishments, but it's always thinking about what we haven't done or what we need to do versus just reveling in the fact that we do some pretty amazing things. But I would say for me, there are several influences, and I've talked about this recently as I've, been sort of, thinking about and talking about over the last month. We celebrated International Women's History Month and International Women's Day. And so me just reflecting on women in my life that have been essential to who I am. And the one person that I've been highlighting recently, although there have been tons of women, is my great grandmother. And honestly, just the lessons that I learned from her in life to be just a kind, good human, but also be a very strong, capable, decisive woman. And I think those two lessons have served me very well over the course of my life and in my career, and especially as I thought about, my leadership opportunities that I've had, and it's really helped me to be a better leader, and to really be thoughtful and stay true to who I am and not to deviate from that or not to try to fit into what someone else thinks I should be based on my title or my role.
Right.
And so that's been sort of a lesson for me over the last few years as I've been thinking about just my own journey.
It's so interesting to hear. It comes from a variety of places sometimes, but that the role modeling this in this way of being a good human that translates so effectively to being a strong leader and
Yeah.
to having a sense of what you want. You mentioned to me before that knowing what you want is an important part of actually being to excel and advance in your career. Did your great grandmother have an influence on that?
Yeah, so I think part of it, absolutely, right? She was never formally educated, but she was extremely intelligent. And there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Her life experiences, I really think, helped her to understand how to really build resiliency. And I learned that from her, to be resilient and to be able to stand up for yourself, but also to know what it is you want. And I think early in my career, I didn't always employ that, right? I thought, I came into corporate America. First of all, I was first generation college student, first generation corporate. So there was no blueprint for me. There was no one to sit me down and say, this is how you need to go into, this company. And these are the sort of pitfalls or rules of the road. So I had to learn that along the way. And Understanding what you want in your career becomes critically important, and we don't always do the work we need to do in order to foster or to understand what it is we truly want. Like, I understand every day we show up, we work, we put our heads down, and we think, hey, if I put my head down and I work really hard, I'm going to get that next promotion. But what you don't understand is you have to take control of your career. And part of taking control of your career is controlling your narrative, which is your brand, how you show up, when you show up, what people are saying about you, and controlling that narrative. Another part of owning your career is understanding, Margot, what you just said. What is it that you really want? Like, yes, I understand I want to be promoted. I understand I want to make more money. Like, that's probably on everyone's radar. But when you sit down with an executive, that's not the answer that you should be giving them, because that's something that everybody wants, right? But every year, I encourage people to take an inventory of where they are. Take an inventory every year and understand for yourself, am I good with the role that I'm doing today? Am I ready to be expanded or want additional opportunities while I'm in this role? So, do I want to take on additional projects? Where do I want to grow? What is it that I'm really good at? And what is it that I need additional opportunities around? And so, when I think about that, I don't think about the areas that I'm not good at, but what I do is I think about, where do I need more experience? And that's the where I want to grow piece. Or the third part of that conversation is, okay, am I good in role? Is it time for me to be expanded while I'm in role and take on those additional projects? Or is it time for me to get another role, a new role, right? Am I ready to be advanced? And then what does that need to look like? So it's not about the next job, but it's about, what experiences am I looking for? Where am I looking to grow? What am I passionate about? And having the right conversations with your manager and your leaders to help you then understand where that next opportunity will be for you and who you need to connect with.
So we have supposedly career management or performance management processes in our
Yep,
organizations. But what you describe sounds like it might go a step beyond even what you might be preparing to have a conversation with your manager.
that's
How
right.
does this fit in with the corporate processes and perhaps the Sandra Quince personal career management process that you put in place?
Absolutely, it goes hand in hand. And just like you said, Margot, every organization has some sort of, if they're advanced, right, in the way that they do their people processes, they do. They have a talent management phase or cycle that they do, whether it's annual, it's twice a year, it's quarterly, whatever that case is. And what you should be doing is aligning your annual conversation with yourself and preparing yourself to prepare your leader for their conversations, right? Every year, what I started doing, and I started this years ago, is prepping my manager or equipping my manager to go in and have talent conversations. I knew when the cycle was because I used to run it for my company. So I knew that. And if you don't know, you can ask your HR partners, you can ask your leaders, like, hey, is talent planning a part of the process that you're involved in? And understand what that looks like. And what I would do is I would have my own conversation with myself, prepare myself with the notes, and then I would equip her. Here's what I'm looking for. I know you're getting ready to go into talent planning conversations. Here's what I've done. Here's what I am really capable at. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's some areas of opportunity for me that I want to grow in. And here's some experiences that I think I want to have. And here's what's next for me, right? So preparing her to go in and have that conversation. And I say her because at the time, my manager was a woman. But if it's a male, same thing, preparing him for that conversation. And then once they come out of the talent planning conversation, schedule another meeting and I talk about what were some of the outcomes based on me, right? And what I don't expect them to sit and say is, "Hey, Margot said this, Sally said that, Jim said this." No, but what they can tell me is, Sandra, here's basically, what your brand is. Here are some areas of strength for you. Here are some opportunities. Now let's build a plan so that we can start to understand who you need to get to know next, so that you network with a purpose, right? Based on what it is you want to achieve. Again, you're managing this process. They're supporting you through this process. And so you're leveraging those opportunities, Margot, and aligning them with the annual cycle or semi-annual or whatever, whenever those cycles are. The other thing I would encourage people to do is to think about any conversations, anytime you're in a conversation with your manager, right? And I know for many of us that might be weekly, where we have a one-on-one with our leaders, might be monthly, might be quarterly, but always having conversations around not just the work, but always trying to understand what's next for you in your career. And that might not be every conversation, but at least quarterly, you should be updating your leader as to what you're thinking, what you've achieved, because you want them to keep that top of mind. And then asking for those skip level meetings with their manager as well, so that you can continue your networking process.
So I hear a number of things in there, but foundationally is you are in charge of your career, right?
Yes.
You are in charge of your career. And if you're leaving it to somebody else to manage for you, you may be disappointed, right?
That's
I'm
right.
also hearing something really important, which is spend some time understanding what you want.
Yeah.
And, in my experience working with women, that's not always been easy. But once they kind of crack that, all of a sudden they can have conversations and it's much easier. It's not waffling. It's not sort of a meandering conversation. I've been really thinking about this. And here's what I'm looking to achieve in my career. Here's what I would like to learn. And I love the way you put it. It's not always about the next role, but about the types of experiences and growth that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And that opens up a world of opportunities. It might be a role that's created. It might be an executive on loan or a leader on loan when you're
That's
lucky,
right.
right? But
Yeah.
there's something there about I'm not constraining it. I'm not putting what I want into a box. I'm thinking about experiences and goals and learning and growth, which you're right. I think lots of organizations are more interested in what you want to learn and how you want to grow than whether it's that role or this role, which becomes quite a narrow conversation.
Absolutely. It's not about the next role, right? And sometimes, while salary is extremely important, and that can be a part of the negotiation once you get to the place where you want to be and you're provided with the experience. And I think you have to make for yourself a checklist of your non negotiables.
Yeah.
What are your non negotiables? Like, I won't move. If that's a non negotiable for you, I can't move. I can travel, or maybe I can't travel, but I can move, right? So I think you have to understand what those non-negotiables are, because that helps you to understand what you want as well, and what you're willing to pivot on or be flexible around in order to get it. And there's nothing wrong. I remember the day that I said out loud that I wanted to be a CEO, like it was like an out-of-body experience. Somebody actually asked me one day, I was sitting and they said, "What is it that you want?" And fumbled out of my mouth was, "I want to be a CEO." And I actually looked around the room because I'm thinking about, did I just say that? Because I felt, part of me felt like, is that too bold?
Mhm.
Am I really good enough to be that? Is What if I fail? Like all of these self-limiting voices start to pop out. And that's another thing we have to quiet. And once I realized I am ready for a bigger, broader role, and you're right, that's how I became the CEO of Paradigm for Parity. I had the conversation with my manager and I told her, listen, I love Bank of America. I think we're a great company, but it's time for me to do something else. And here's what I'm really good at, and I know I'm passionate about. Here's some areas that are opportunities for me, but I want to grow and continue to, you know, co- you know, get development in those areas so that I can become good in those areas, right?
Right. Right.
And here's an experience, like I hadn't led a team in a while. I wanted to lead a team. I wanted to build strategy. I wanted to be the head of whatever it is I was building. And at the time, Bank of America wasn't able to offer me that opportunity. And that was okay. And she and we talked about it, and she said, Sandra, so give us an opportunity. Let us go back and let us figure out what we have available. And in the meantime, I want you to stay close to me. Let's continue to have these conversations. I want you to look internally, here are a few people to have conversations with. But she also said, look externally.
Mhm.
Do you know your value in the market? And at that point, I had not done that bit of homework. And that was very new to me. And some people feel blasphemy. How dare you look externally? And what you don't realize is probably most of your C-suite, and more than likely your CEO, have a very healthy relationship with a search firm. And they're having conversations with these people all the time, not because they're ready to leave, but because they understand their value in the market, and they're always on someone's radar. So when the time comes and when they're ready,
Right.
they've already done the groundwork. But see, we don't oftentimes give ourselves that permission. And when she shared that with me, it wasn't because she was saying, hey, we want you to leave. And in fact, she said just the opposite. Like, I don't want you to go. Like, this is why I want to have this conversation. But you should know your value in the market. And at the end of the day, when you make a decision about your career, it's about you and what's best for you and your family. And at that point, what's best for you and your life, right? It's not about being loyal to an organization, but it's about really what is it that you want and finding out what's best for you. So I did the external homework. I connected with a couple of search firms, which I stay connected today. But they helped me to build my resume, to think about, continuously thinking about what I wanted, ask me questions around salary and what is it that I'm looking for, what's important to me. So helping me frame up all of that, but also helping me to understand what my value was in the market.
Right.
So I knew how to negotiate also internally with my organization. So those were all really helpful exercises. I didn't end up leaving because the opportunity came to me to be the CEO of Paradigm for Parity, because at the time, Bank of America, we had already done Leader on Loan. We'd been doing it for a few years. Paradigm for Parity was Bank of America was a member of the coalition, and Paradigm for Parity at that point was looking for a CEO. They were having conversations with some of their key stakeholders, letting them know some of the changes they were making, moving from more of a volunteer organization, hiring an executive director, but looking for that next CEO. And they didn't really come to Bank of America asking them for the CEO. They just came to Bank of America asking them for support that they had already received over the last couple of years, but wanted to make sure they can continue to count on their support.
Mm-hmm.
In that meeting was my manager and her manager. And they said, hold up, we think we have a solution. Before you continue down this path and hire your CEO, let us come back to you. We think we have something. And that's when the idea was presented to me. So
That was you laying a lot of groundwork leading up to that. It could have been a very different story if they told you about that conversation after the fact, after you'd said that you were interested in doing more, after you'd shared how you wanted to grow and the kinds of experiences you were looking for. So that
absolutely.
intentionality was
That
so important.
intentionality and equipping my manager with what I was ready to do next. I'd already started those conversations. So when she got in that meeting, the first person she thought about was Sandra.
You know, it's interesting because I hear often, and I'm sure we're going to get a question about it. You know, what if you don't have that kind of a manager? What if you don't have someone who's willing to engage in that kind of a conversation, right? Many leaders are intimidated to say they don't have the next step for you. They don't know what it is. They're scared to lose talent. So they don't engage in a fully transparent conversation like you had.
That's right.
Have you had experiences where your manager wasn't quite as open to this, or advice for those who do have, less than open management relationships?
Absolutely. I've been in those relationships myself. And it is not easy working for someone who doesn't necessarily invest in their talent, right? Because that's what I say. It's all about investing in your people. And what you'll realize is when you do the right thing for your people, you know, you will continue to attract great talent, but you can also export great talent as well. So I have been in that situation. And what I've done, and you probably saw this in the quote that was a part of advertising for this conversation. And one of the things that I've shared is let your network be your net worth.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is when you build a network of people, let it be a return on investment for you. And that's what I found what worked for managers who are not great leaders or are not inclusive leaders.
Right.
And so you go around, and what I began to do is I began to understand, okay, so she's a blocker or he's a blocker. So what I need to do is I need to remove that roadblock. And I began to have conversations and relationships with their peers and their leader. And it wasn't in a sneaky bad way. It was just me scheduling time to get to know them so they can get to know me, so they can understand my goals, my aspirations, because there's more than one person that sits at the talent planning table.
Yeah.
And that's why it's critical that you have the more voices you have sitting at that table saying, I think Margot should do this. I fully support her. That's called sponsorship, right? They're opening that door, they're speaking on your behalf. They're in places of influence where you are not, and they can speak on your behalf because they know what you're capable of. They're willing to put their personal and professional capital behind you.
Yeah.
And when you have multiple voices saying that, then that one lone voice that may not necessarily agree with them, that voice becomes insignificant.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I've been able to handle those leaders that weren't necessarily great leaders, or handle those managers that weren't necessarily great leaders.
And so in there is a skill, Sandra. I'm getting the sense that one of your superpowers is courage. That you can't be timid to open up new relationships. You've taken time to learn how to share what you've done without sounding boastful. And you probably had to practice some of these things, or was it all natural? Like
No.
how do you go from being, oh, I'd really like to do something else, or I'd really like to advance, but I don't know how to get it done, to scheduling time with peers and your boss's boss, to being able to speak confidently about what you've achieved? How do you get from one place to that place?
Yeah, so it takes practice. And I think it started with me. I was, like I said, when I came into corporate America, I thought if I put my head down and I work really hard, that I'm going to get promoted, right? Because that's what happens. You work hard, you do a good job, you get promoted. And I will tell you that being good at what you do is table stakes. Like that's the expectation. I learned that way back in high school when I would bring home A's. My brother brought home a B one time, and my mother she was so excited. He brought home a B because he didn't typically, he struggled in high school. I brought home A's all the time, and she was like, "Yep, but you always bring home A's, right?" And so it was common, it was core, it was par for the course, right? And so I learned that early on, that yes, doing a good job is table stakes, and that's the expectation. So don't expect to get patted on the back because you do a good job, right? And so the other piece to that puzzle is, if you're putting your head down and all you're doing is working, what you find is, and I'm doing a demonstration here, is that your head is down and things are happening around you. And when you look up, people have been promoted who they may be just as good as you, or people who've been promoted that are not as good as you. And then you start to say to yourself, why is this happening? Well, why is it happening? Is because they're leveraging what Carla Harris, and if you've never heard Carla Harris, I encourage you to research her and to get any of her books that she has out there. But one of the things she talks about is relationship currency versus performance currency. And when you have performance currency is only as good as the job that you're doing. So you do a good job, you always do a good job. So go back to my A's. I made straight A's, I always made straight A's. That's performance currency. That was expected of me. You do a good job, you put your head down, we're doing a good job. That's performance currency. And performance currency only gets you so far because at some point, that's the expectation.
Right.
Right? But it's relationship currency that continues to build worth over time, value over time. And it's relationship currency that gets you from point A to point B for the remainder of your career. And what is relationship currency? It's garnering sponsorship, it's networking, and understanding how to really articulate your value and your worth to others, and ensuring that you have key influencers in places that can really help support your career journey.
Mm.
That's so powerful. And that's the piece, that's the differentiating factor that really supports talent. No one makes it to the C-suite without sponsorship. Somebody sitting at a table somewhere, as good as Margot is, and I know she's good at what she does, but somebody has to say, we're going to give her that job. We're going to promote her to that level. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then we're going to come behind her, run air cover, and ensure her success. Right?
Yeah.
That's the relationship currency piece, and sponsorship is a part of that.
You know, it's interesting, and it helps to make the transition because we've talked a lot about what can women do for themselves? What can I do to help me manage my career, think about my network, understand what it is I think I would like, and find that inspiration in. But it can't all be up to individuals. It can't all be left up to us to make the difference. And I think that's where Paradigm for Parity and some of the organizations that you've seen, the best practices, share with us some ideas about, you know, what are organizations doing that's making an impact in advancing women?
Absolutely. And so Paradigm for Parity is an organization that is dedicated to achieving gender parity at every level of leadership in corporate America, right? And for us, it is 50-50. We want to see women equal representation at every level because we want it to reflect the world we live in. And today, the world we live in, well over 40% is women, almost 50. And so why shouldn't every level of your organization look the same way? And we help support that journey through strategy, but also through development or opportunities for women to really unearth their superpower. So I love what you said about the superpower piece, Margot. So it's not about developing you because you're already there. It's about helping you discover where you need to ensure that you go deeper around, or where we can unearth your confidence in areas to help you go out and be your own best advocate. But there are things that companies and organizations have to do because there are real systemic barriers, right? And one part of that where it works really well, I've talked about it so far, which is sponsorship. Sponsorship has to be a part of a company or an organization's strategy to advancing women in their company. Whether they do it formally or informally, it has to be a part of that strategy. The other thing that organizations need to do is they really need to upskill their leaders.
Mm.
Probably 30% of your organization leads 70 to 80% of the organization, because your people leaders are fewer than your people.
Right.
Right? Because it's more than a 1-to-1 reporting ratio in most organizations.
Right.
And so when you want to change culture, or you want to create the opportunity to advance talent equitably, you have to invest in that leadership piece, in your leaders. And that's where some organizations are finding today where they need to spend more quality time. And you have to think about who you're promoting in those roles, right? Because oftentimes, and I've talked about this, is we promote the person that sells the most widgets, and not necessarily a great leader.
Right. Who's creating the environment so that 10 more people can sell.
That's right.
Really, really.
Who's creating the right environment so not only 10 more people can sell widgets, but that those people they can create a diverse team of people to sell the widgets, and then they can invest in their talent so that those people will be promoted in the organization, right? And so again, it's creating and fostering that. And organizations that are spending that time in that leadership bucket, they're finding some really good success. But it's also about your leadership, your C-suite, and what are they doing? So that sponsorship, creating opportunities for really courageous conversations, I think are so critical. And that's what helped build my confidence. At Bank of America, years ago, we embarked on a courageous conversation campaign, if you will.
Mhm.
And what companies don't realize is, yes, you're creating opportunities to have conversations around socio-economic, geopolitical happenings of the day, but what it does is it begins to open up a culture where people feel more comfortable just speaking up, right? And
Yes.
so when you do that, then as an individual, you feel more comfortable going to your leader to have conversations about just about anything, my career, needing flexibility, um, all the things that would help me be the star player that I know that I can be for this
Mhm.
organization.
Right. So there's something about really thinking intentionally about creating that kind of environment and then
Yes.
having the skills. I mean, courageous conversations is an equal part of listening to being able to articulate yourself well, right? But it's a lot about listening. And so having those skills to be able to create that kind of an inclusive environment, really very important. And it's interesting, if you think back over, you've had more than 15 years in roles related to talent, diversity, inclusion, the last two at Parity. When you think about what's changed or what's shifted, what do you think are the newest ideas that organizations are really, or is it maybe it's a mindset that's shifted? What's the newest thing that organizations are playing with now or working with?
Yeah, so I think you have organizations and everything to is falls into sort of this pre and post, right? So you have pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-George
Mhm.
Floyd, post-George Floyd, right? And so we're living in sort of this post-COVID, post-George Floyd era. And quite frankly, and honestly, there is a war on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we hear it every day. But the data tells us, there was a recent study that came out that said they polled employees. There was thousands of employees that were polled, and 90% of employees said, I want my company to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you listen to the rhetoric that we hear every day, you would think it's the opposite, that people don't want this. And that's not the case. And so, what companies are dealing with at this point is really understanding where they are in this moment. And am I going to double down, right? And continue to do the things that I know that have yielded us the results to be an inclusive, equitable, and diverse organization, and therefore continue to, build profitability for our company? Because at the end of the day, I want my company to be profitable. You know why? Because I want to make money. I don't want to go with an organization that's going up in flames. So again, understanding that this is really a business imperative. This is not just doing good for good's sake. This is a business imperative. And so companies are grappling with that. And those that are doubling down are doing that. And some are doubling down and being quite quiet about it because they don't want to be caught in the crossfire of what's happening and the rhetoric that's out there. They're just going to do what they do and continue to move forward and continue to ensure that they're creating the right environment for all of their employees, which
Mhm.
I'm in complete agreement with that. And then there's organizations out there that, quite frankly, are pausing because they are trying to figure out, what do we do in this moment? And oh, by the way, are we data centric to understanding who works for us and where they work? Because a lot of organizations have not built those platforms that allow them to really understand where their gaps and their cliffs are. They just went and threw a bunch of things out there and, started doing things because everyone else was doing it and they knew they needed to, but now they need to build a true strategy and connect it to the business imperative. And then there's those organizations out there that are just, saying this great, diversity is not good for business. It is reverse discrimination. It is this, it is that, it is whatever they're calling it. But those are organizations that were never dedicated to achieving those inclusive environments in the first place. And so I think that's sort of where companies are. And that's where I find many of my conversations are going today. But many of the organizations I speak with, they're doubling down and they're continuing to do what they do and understand that it is truly a benefit for them to ensure that they have the best and brightest talent.
That's what it all comes down to, right? Absolutely.
Yep.
I'm going to turn it over. This is your cue to start getting your questions in if you haven't already. But before I do that, in today's context in 2024, with all of what you've just spoken to as a backdrop, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, what's your number one piece of advice for a woman who has aspirations to do more, to have a challenging career? What's that one piece of advice that you would give for 2024?
Invest in yourself. And really think about what it is that you want, and go back and do some of the things that I shared with you earlier around assessing where you are. And then I want you to tell yourself every day that you are worth it, that you are really good at what you do. And then I want you to just be bold and have the conversation with your leaders.
Get out there, start with one conversation could make such a huge difference. Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you for that. Okay, I've been so enthralled in the conversation, I haven't opened up the questions, but here we go. This is a lovely one. Fear, well, I shouldn't say lovely. This is a good question. Fear can be crippling. I was thinking about the vulnerability, just starting there. How do you deal with the uncertainty and apprehension if you feel that corporate America is no longer fulfilling and considering a career change?
Yeah. So this is a good one, right? Because I think it's kind of where I was, right? Am I fulfilled? Is this the right thing for me? What's next for me? And I say, don't be afraid of a career change. This where I say, go back to investing in yourself and really understanding what it is that you want and what's going to really create that for you, right? Is it where you are today? And if it's not, then I say go for it and understand where it is you want to be. And there's nothing wrong with a career change. I was having a conversation with a woman. I spoke at an event at another organization, and she came up to me and she said, at my age, and I stopped her. I said, whatever you're going to say after that, don't say it. I said, here's what I'm going to say. It doesn't matter about your age. What is it that you want? And let's go get it. And I think that as women, that's what we have to give ourselves the permission to be able to do. What are your non-negotiables? And then stand firm on that.
Have the courage to do that. Yeah.
Have the courage. And one of the things I always say is hungry people eat anything. So don't wait until you're so desperate, like you're just so fed up that you're ready to jump out there, which is why I say every year I have that conversation with myself, because I want to start making plans before I'm so at the point where I'll jump out there and take anything, right? And so you don't want to get to that point.
Here's a really tactical question. I'll take it in a bit of a different direction. How does one ask for a raise and stand your ground on what you should be getting? I think you know an answer to this one.
Yeah. I think you, first of all, this is why the homework around what your value is in the market is so important. Because it gives you an idea of, number one, am I being paid what I do currently in the market? And so understanding that and getting connected to a search firm is really a great way to be able to do that. I think the other thing is for you to be able to share with your manager your value and worth. What is it that you do that adds value to your organization? And can you quantify that value? Right. So start building that case for yourself, because that's exactly the language you want to build. And then there's nothing wrong for you asking for a salary review. I talk about this all the time. At some point in my career, I was not. I I wasn't being paid, and there's no law against you having conversations around your salary and what others make, right? I mean, those are conversations you can have. But at one point in my career, I was grossly underpaid, but I was so afraid to ask that by the time, one day I got the courage and I just said, I'm going to ask for a salary review. And I started asking for a salary review. And at that point, it began to sort of escalate to others, and especially in HR, looking at, and all I'm asking for is I want to be sure that I'm being paid comparable to my peers based
Yeah.
on the work that I'm doing. That's one form of pay. The other form of pay is a bonus structure. Are you eligible for a bonus structure, right? And if you are, how do you ensure that you are performing at a level that allows you to get maximum on your bonus structure? Having that conversation with your manager. But then there are other ways, right? It's not always about the dollars and cents that you get from a salary. But again, if you know what your non-negotiables are and know what's important to you, is it negotiating things like a certificate where you are, growing skills in certain areas? Is it negotiating, higher education? And then, are you negotiating other things that are critical to you? I heard somebody say, I negotiated parking, So again, think about all the things that are important to you, and everything is negotiable. Now, the answer might be no. And that's where you then have to, or maybe not now, but that's when you have to understand where you are and what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. But having the conversation is the first step.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a couple of questions in here. This one is about, I have a strong female leader that has had the career I really admire. I already work closely with her and have a great rapport. But how do I reach out to her to request a one-on-one to talk about career? I want to share that I find her inspirational, but struggle to vocalize this without sounding like she's used a phrase that we've all maybe used, sucking up to her. Right? You don't want to be the person who looks like they're doing things for anything other than the right reasons, right? You can be truly inspired by somebody.
That can be.
I
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And the only reason why I laugh is because I feel you, like, on that sucking up, because I never want to appear to be the teacher's pet. That's
Right.
like the worst thing that you want to do. But here's what I'll tell you. If you admire her and you're looking at her from a distance, chances are she's going to be very flattered and open to that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are. And really what you can do is say, listen, I've watched your career and it's inspiring to me, and I want to learn more from you. Do you mind taking some time with me to have a conversation? Yeah. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And I think those things, I don't think, honestly, if she's worth her salt, let me just say this. If she's worth her salt, she will absolutely say, absolutely, I'd love to have the conversation with you. And here's how you get on my calendar. Yeah. And if she comes back at you and makes you feel some sort of way about the way that you've approached her, then I'd question whether or not she is the leader I want to associate myself with in the first place.
There's very few leaders, especially the ones that we admire, who aren't gracious about finding some time. Might not be this week, might be a couple weeks down the road, but finding some time to share insights and just learn a bit more. It's part of a leader's job is to understand who their talent is, whether there's a direct reporting relationship or they come from another part of the organization. So I think it's surprising to people how much, a simple question will be, or how well a simple question to spend some time together will be regarded.
Absolutely.
So I was told not only to not only focus on networking with leaders, but also at same level colleagues. who do you favor networking with? People you want to work with in the future, or people who are more senior?
Yeah. So I think when you think about networking, it should be a strategy behind it. Remember, your network is your net worth. And what I'm not saying is that worth or value can't come from people who are peers to you, because um, be careful how you treat people, because one day they might be your boss. I know you may have heard that term before. So I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is be very strategic around understanding where you want to spend your time. And in the quote that you saw from me earlier, I talked about networking being like a garden. And when you gardening is hard work, and it takes time and effort and energy, and it takes a lot of patience because you need sun, you need rain. It takes elements outside of all the work that you're doing to ensure that that garden is going to thrive. Networking is very much the same way. And so you want to be strategic around who are the folks that I need to get to know from a networking perspective. Now, that's different from me building a board of directors and mentors. So maybe some people in my circle, I need to be I need them as part of my board of directors, 4 or 5, 3 to 5 people that I can bounce ideas off of, connect with, and who will help guide, lead me. I can be honest and just sort of check my thinking on things.
Yeah.
That's a great way to use several people. But then there's the networking piece, which is again keeping in mind that I really want to be strategic around who I'm connecting with, because I want to learn something. I want to expand my skill sets in a way, but also I want to be able to contribute and give something right back. So again, just understanding that there are varying ways that you can leverage the peers, your manager's peers, and then your manager's manager. So keep that in mind and decide for yourself, what's important to you. But there's no right or wrong. It just
Yeah.
depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Right. It's probably not a one or the other. It's a yes and what's the right mix, right?
Right.
There's a question here about, going back to what organizations can do. Other than sponsorship, what are 2 to 3 areas that organizations need to focus on to ensure women are set up for leadership and represented in leadership positions? And I heard you also talk about leadership skills. So that piece around being a good leader, a good career manager, and leaning into those conversations for the people who report to you. I also heard you talk about data. Maybe you could say a little bit more about data and measurement, because I do think that that's something that organizations need to spend a lot of time on.
Absolutely. Organizations need to have a robust data analysis on their employees. So they need to understand 3 specific areas. One is hiring. What's my hiring data? How do I ensure that we are hiring equitably? And what are some of the processes I'm putting in place to ensure, and inspection points I'm putting in place to ensure? So whether it's my slating routines, whether it's my review routines, whether it's looking at particular roles and making sure. But if I don't have data in that area, then it's going to be very difficult for me. The other area is developing and promoting. What's my data there? And when you think about developing, that really is critical, because who are we giving the opportunities to, right? Sometimes there's these really big opportunities that allow us to get experience exposure to certain leaders, and who are we doing that for and who are we not doing that for. And then having data around the promotion piece is critical. And then last but not least, you have to have data around retention. Who are we retaining? And those 3 levers become the critical points in ensuring that I am hiring, that I am promoting, and that I'm retaining women in my organization. And in between all of that are, what are the people processes we're putting in place, and what are those inspection points we're putting in place to ensure that we're doing this the right way and that we're on trajectory. And it should always be at or above where you are today. That's the only way you're going to make progress in each of those areas.
Yeah, very smart. It's interesting. You mentioned leadership development as something that organizations should be spending time on. And given the number of questions that I'm trying to scan, here. There's a number of them talking about, what do I do if I don't have a supportive leader? What if I need to go around somebody? How do I start? Like, there's a lot of these questions in here. So for those of you in the audience who are wondering what to do, what we can do from an organizational perspective, there's got to be something that needs, we need to do more of in terms of supporting our leaders. I'm going to give you one of these questions to tackle. What tactical advice can you share with ambitious and career-driven women who are juggling a young family and elderly parents? And how would you frame the conversation with your direct and resistant / unsupportive leader?
Yeah. So one of the things that when it comes to a leader, again, I am of the mindset that I tend to go around and above.
Yeah.
And I don't do it, I do it respectfully. And what I do is I inform my leader that I'm going to have skip level meetings with their manager. And it's not an ask, it's an inform. And therefore I've done my part and been respectful. And then I start that. And it's not so I can complain about the leader, but it's so
Right.
that I can truly have an opportunity to have experience and exposure to their leader to ensure, that I am, progressing my career and I'm thoughtful about my career. And I'm really wanting the opportunity to understand how to continue my upward trajectory. The other thing I do again is I look at their peers and get to know their peers and help them to understand who I am, what I do. And so have those conversations and don't be afraid again to just share with your leader, be respectful. Here's what I'm doing, just so they know, and move and then make it happen.
Yeah.
The other thing is I'm not when I had my child, I knew I did not want to stay home, and I knew my career was extremely important to me. And when I came back off of maternity leave, I pulled up with my manager and I said to her, it was a her at the time, I said, I want to let you know that I have just had my baby. I thank the company for the time that I had available to me. I want to continue my career growth and opportunity. And I felt the need to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether it was right that I had to have it or whether it was wrong I had to have it, but I had it. I want to continue my career. I also want to be a really good mother to my child, and I need your support in that. And so that's when we began to talk about any flexibility that I needed. Every day I needed to leave at a certain time so that I can breastfeed. My son was at a caregiver that wasn't far from the office. So these are things that I started to negotiate with my manager to help them to understand, I'm going to give you 250%, but on the back end, I also need to give my family that time as well. So you're going to get the great employee, and I want to continue my career, but I also need this to be able to do that. And so that's how I had it. And again, with aging parents, is just understanding what are some of the benefits that the company can offer you to help you with that, to help support you in that journey. Are there things out there that you might be missing that they can support you with, right? And a lot of times it's just having a conversation. This is what I'm dealing with right now. And just because I'm here today doesn't mean I'm always going to be in this phase of my life.
Right. Right. We go through a lot of those phases. That's absolutely true. I need to wrap things up. Sandra, it's been just a pleasure and a delight to hear your perspective. You do certainly have a superpower. You're transparent, you're courageous. I think we can all learn and take some inspiration from that, no matter where we're starting from, what starting point. So thank you for sharing your story and your insights. We do have a couple more of these conversations coming up. So hope that everyone who's on the line will come back and join us on the 16th with Mia Mathis and on April the 30th with Lisa Mello. Both have terrific stories of their own. But thank you again, Sandra, for sharing yours today. And I hope that everybody who's listened has some kind of inspiration or tactic or strategy to take back and advance your own career or advance the other women who are around you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.